it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. So I know it's been 100 years. Actually, also let me set my beloved, what's this thing supposed to do? Most writing questions that I would be asked could be answered with productivity timer. I've become a big fan of just doing things in bite-sized pieces. Okay, so it's been a really long time. I'm aware. I'd like to be able to do this more, but I think if I'm being very honest, these haven't been fun for me in a while. They feel very self-promotion-y, which is what I try to avoid. I mean, the origin of this series is that people would ask me a lot of questions that I wanted to spend a lot of time on. And so this was kind of my way of like actually being present, rather than giving myself carpal tunnel answering things long form on Tumblr. But obviously I've really changed. The circumstances of my life have really changed since this series started. And so you might not know this if you just started watching recently, but I used to get a lot of really interesting questions. And now I mainly get the same writing question over and over and over again. I mean, I would say that if you watch the last few videos in a row, it's basically just look at the book that's coming out. Here's some promotional kind of language, which I hate. I truly hate promoting myself. I've never liked doing it. And then also like, how do I get back into writing? How do I get over this hump, this writing hump? And you know, it's not that I don't enjoy answering writing questions. It's just that like, every scenario is very specific to you and what you're going through. And it's mainly just like, keep going. Productivity timer. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I might change, and all of this is to say, it's not that I'm going to stop doing this because this is still sort of the best way for me to be here. You know, I really hate Instagram. I don't use TikTok. I think it's probably going to be really bad for my brain. Twitter's dead. So two things have happened. One, I've started using Tumblr again. I don't know if you've noticed this, but so lately when I have a thought and I'm like, maybe this is relevant to people who enjoy my books or people who follow me for whatever reason, I'm like, which social media platform should I put it on? And it's almost never Instagram, right? Because it's usually text-based. I'm a writer. When I have a thought, I write it in words in a sentence. And you know, Blue Sky is like, I think I just don't use it enough. This is the thing, right? With every platform, you get out of it what you put into it, and I don't put very much into it. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna say all these random little thoughts on Tumblr. They tended to be fandom-based. Here's an update on my life. My son, who is 5 now, my God, that means that like, oh my God, that means the Atlas 6 is 6 years old. These are milestones I should probably like celebrate or acknowledge in some way, but I'm a future moving person. I'm a next, please. Thank you, next. So my son has gotten really into Star Wars. I think a lot of people have asked me how I introduced him to Star Wars. And I think, you know, he watched the Young Jedi show for a long time, like when he was little. That was an intro to the world, but it has no crossover with any of the like classic canon Star Wars characters. So that's more like, this is what a Jedi is. It is an excellent show. I will link to my essay where I compared and contrasted the Marvel, the Spidey and Friends show, which is to say nothing of the Iron Man show. Is the Iron Man show not, and bear in mind, I don't care about Marvel canon, but I'm pretty sure like the only thing about Tony Stark is that he had some conflict with his father, right? But in the Iron Man show, young Tony Stark is always trying to help his father's company. But his father, Stark Industries, they're a weapons manufacturer, are they not? Like, I know it's not meant to be that deep, but I just don't understand how we got here. Love the Young Jedi show. It ended recently in a super emotional way, actually. I got really invested in the characters. I did not expect to do that with a show that's designed for young children. But so I think that's how my son got introduced to the world. And then I showed him episode 1 a few times because I thought, you know, he's very into spaceships. He's very into racing as a concept. And so I showed him episode 1 to show him the pod racing. And then he met R2-D2. We were at Disneyland. I live in LA, so pretty easy to do. We went to Disneyland for my birthday in January, and so my son like happened to spend a lot of time with the actor slash robot playing R2-D2 in the Star Wars area of the park. And at that point, my son fell in love with R2-D2, wanted to know everything there is to know about R2-D2 because he got to like walk the robot around. He was like, oh, I'm very into this now. Tell me everything there is to know about this little guy. So we showed him Phantom Menace again, and then he wanted to continue. He was very invested in Anakin. He also really liked Padme. In episode 2, he said Padme was a really cool guy and told me that I should be her for Halloween, so that's coming. And then he started to get really invested. He was mostly in it for R2-D2, I will be honest. The droid content is like very important to my son. So then we went to episode 3, which I hadn't seen since the first time I saw it in the theaters. And you know, there's some loose threads in the narrative. I think that it mattered, like the existence of the Clone Wars series matters. It's something that my son and I have also been watching together. And yeah, I feel I am one of those people where I grant a lot of clemency to the prequels. I actually admire the prequels in terms of their storytelling and what George Lucas was trying to do, chronicling the rise of space fascism. I think that there's a lot of really interesting psychological depth to the prequels. So I know that they're bad, but they're also, I read somewhere that Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen have anti-chemistry, which I think is true. I don't know. I think, I was very in love with Hayden Christensen. He is actually what drew me to the Star Wars franchise, I'll be honest. And I think he did a good job. I think he does a really good balance between the petulance of Anakin that sort of leads you, like you understand where the corruption arc is going because he has these shades of darkness and pain and the silliness that is also the chip on his shoulder. It's a complicated character. It's the romance scenes that definitely don't work. But also, could anyone else have been Padme the way Natalie Portman was Padme? I don't know. Anyway, my son was devastated when Obi-Wan and Anakin were having their battle, their duel, which, to be fair, is an incredibly good scene. It's very cinematic, and it is like, it is the thing that's stuck in my head. I'm gonna talk this whole time about Star Wars, aren't I? I'm gonna fast forward a little bit to say that, so my son was devastated by Obi-Wan and Anakin. He said, but they're best friends, and he was really, like, I never wanna see that movie again because it hurt me. He's a sensitive soul. He actually surprisingly loved episode 4. I think part of it, I was a little bit, I didn't know if he was gonna like it because I wasn't sure how it was going to be visually compared to what he's used to seeing with computer animation. But he was most engaged probably with episode 4. Again, a lot of droid content in episode 4, so he was very excited to see R2-D2 and C-3PO, and he was like, oh, that's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and anyway. We watched them all the way through, and this was my first time seeing The Rise of Skywalker. And as I said on Tumblr, I have notes. I will say, I think it's good that I had some distance, that like, I wasn't in a rush to see The Rise of Skywalker, because I really enjoyed The Last Jedi, but I'm also not like I understand Reylo. I think Reylo is super interesting narratively. I'm not hugely invested in the romance I don't know, I think it's Adam Driver. I can't be interested in Adam Driver when Oscar Isaac is on the screen. Like Poe Dameron is like, that's an Olivie Blake character, you know, like that's catnip to me. So I was really distracted by him. And so I'm sort of like agnostic. I think it is narratively the most interesting relationship in terms of furthering the story. It just wasn't the thing that I was like, I have to see this happen. So I wasn't, and everyone was mad at The Rise of Skywalker, so I was not in a hurry to watch it. But then we watched it with my son, and, you know, a lot of decisions were made. It's a very strange film in that it seemed designed to provoke emotional reactions that didn't have the 3-movie payoff that theoretically they could have had. You know, we didn't have the trilogy landing, but it was really entertaining. I mean, you can't deny it's an enjoyable movie to watch if you can just sort of let go of the fact that a lot of what's happening, it doesn't make any sense. My husband, this was the first time he'd watched all the movies, and he was like, how could Palpatine have returned? He fell down a reactor shaft and then they blew it up. And I was like, you know, I think that there's a reason they don't even really bother answering that question, and let's not ask it. But the one thing I do want to note is that my son actually is a Reylo. And he would kind of go in and out of watching, paying attention, because the scenes where adults were talking, obviously not that interesting to a 5-year-old. But the scene where Ben Solo brings Rey back to life, my son, at a whisper, goes, "Oh, I really like this." And it was so sweet and wholesome that I don't think there was a way that I could really hate the film, even though I have so many questions about how, like, what conversations were had that were like, are we gonna explain this? Should we just not? Narratively, some flaws. I will show you some stuff. Okay, so this is the paperback Girl Dinner. As you can see, it's pink. It's excellent. She just looks good in every outfit. And then I also have the Dreamland hardcover, which is gorgeous. The cover is designed by Will Staley. And it has a little underneath here. It says, "Run, the monster advised." I didn't. I also really like the contrast with the blues here. And then we have end page art by Pole Arts, who is, of course, I mean, she breathes, and it's incredible work, honestly. Incredible. This is so good, so good. Yeah, and then there is a sprayed edge. I don't know if I'm on record for having said this before. I don't like super love sprayed edges, and I was not convinced when they showed me the orange sprayed edge design. I was like, do we think that the girlies who love the sprayed edge are like hyped for orange? You know, the only thing I kept thinking about was that whoever said orange is the new pink was seriously disturbed. But you know, we went with, I kind of requested more of a bronze. I was like, okay, orange, I see the vision, I see the contrast. I wonder if we could do more of a bronze, because the bronze metallic lettering on the cover, and I think that is achieved. I think it looks good, actually. I think it looks good. I think it's a beautiful hardcover. Yeah, there's the spine, good spine. Very good spine. Very, the color scheme is sort of the life of a showgirl. I don't want to talk about this too long, but I really enjoyed the coverage from New York Magazine of the Taylor Swift wedding. Especially, there was one article for someone who was just like hanging around Madison Square Garden, talking to people and asking what they thought. And I thought it was very funny that a lot of people were like, I think that like she owes us a glimpse at this, or like that I'm surprised that there's not a public red carpet, and I just thought that was incredibly funny. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that. I have some writing questions. There's a couple that I think I can answer quickly because, again, they're versions of questions I've heard before. One of which is, do you have any advice for rediscovering a dormant writing talent? I love the phrasing of this, because so you're acknowledging that you have talent is dormant. And so I feel that, how do you wake dormant things? You know, like you wake them up, right? It's sort of, you know, how do you retrain for a marathon a little bit at a time? Productivity timer, you know? I think you have to be realistic about what you can you have to be realistic about what you can achieve. Be realistic about the fact that if you haven't been writing in a while, that's growth that you haven't had, so you can't, you know, it's just like, just fundamentally, This is art, okay? So you just do it. You just you just try your best. You try your best to tell the story. You tell the story that is true and authentic to you and what you're thinking about. You do it the best that you can. Tell it to yourself, and then you fix it the best that you can, and then it achieves what you wanted it to achieve, or it doesn't, and you write something else. I think it's fair to start small. I think that short form should not be viewed just as practice, because short form is incredibly hard to do well on its own. But it is something that is, if you're trying to get back into the process of writing, if you're trying to build back up your writing endurance, then of course, a short story, a novelette, a novella, that's all doable. Or you can start writing a novel and you just write it a few minutes at a time. There's no rule that says you have to suddenly sit down and write, you know, however many words or however, whatever. That's something, the word count, that's something you work up to. The thing is that manuscripts are finite. So if you just start, eventually you'll reach the end. This is, if you could talk a bit about knowing what your story is supposed to be. I mean, right off the bat, the story is what it is. Like, I don't usually know what the story is about until after I finish telling it. I am, one of the things I think about art, one of the things about writing, and for me specifically in my process, because I'm a discovery writer, is I am comfortable with discomfort. I'm comfortable not knowing where the story is going and discovering it along the way. So it says, I have some story ideas where the parameters are set and I know exactly how I want a book to feel at the end. However, there are some ideas that feel more loose and have infinite possibilities. I recently finished the first draft of my novel, and in my assessment of it, I realized there's no firm direction for the plot, and too many possibilities has halted my revision. I don't understand. So you finished the book, but you still don't know what it's about. This is a very personal thing. This is you need to sit with the book and decide, what was it? Now I'm just hearing the Lord song, what was that? This is such a personal thing. I will say that when I finish a manuscript, it is this epiphany that's like, I know I'm done because I have achieved, like I have had the epiphany. I have had the feeling, I now know what the story is. If you haven't had that feeling, I don't think you have finished the first draft of your manuscript. It seems like you did not end it properly. You don't yet know what the story is. I would argue that it's not done. So I think that's just something you have to sit with. That's not something I can answer in a generic way. This is, again, just remember, this is art. This is your art piece. It means what you want it to mean. I wouldn't worry yet about like, is this a good book or a commercial book or whatever. You can't like concern yourself with like broad stroke quality. You just have to understand what the story is. When you're choosing between outcomes, there's always gonna be one thing that speaks to you more. But I always say that like, if you have a couple of different ideas, write them both. You're gonna know which one is better. So, you know, it doesn't hurt you. It is not a loss to the process. It's not unproductive to follow a couple of different paths and decide which one is stronger. I think that those instincts, that's the artistry. The knowing which route to take is the art. A question that's not about writing, wonderful. I love writing, but I miss when people would ask me about their boyfriends. Although that was kind of the same thing after a while too. It was kind of always like, break up with him. Okay, the people in my real life have known me as a writer for many years. But lately, with the rise of AI, I have increasingly gotten comments along the lines of, why are you still doing that the hard way or spending so much time on it? Essentially asking why I refuse to use AI in any part of my writing process. Fucking losers. Okay, I think it's bizarre because you wouldn't ask a tennis player why they continue to play tennis when a robot could do it. I write because I enjoy writing. If I'm not writing, what's in it for me? Is this just another example of people seeing the arts as a waste of time? How would you respond to comments like this, aside from the fact that AI is destroying the planet? It's really hard, right? Because I feel that there's been a certain degree of normalizing of AI use, especially like everyday AI use. The number of people who are like, oh, just ask ChatGPT this. And I'm like, I don't understand. ChatGPT is not Google. Like, so there's been a normalizing of AI use in everyday life. So what I can say to that is that people don't want to lecture, right? You don't want to become insufferable. However, I think that there is such a thing as an appropriate amount of like shame. Like, you know how people used to feel shame about reading romance novels or about like, you know, things that weren't even shameful. I think we should make AI use a little bit shameful, just to be like, I think that it is fair to, you know, we can't give everybody a lecture about its water use or the destruction of ecological communities. I have been wanting for years to write about marine biology, and specifically when Black women study marine biology, because they're essentially climate activists, because there are so many Black communities that are essentially being poisoned by administrative decisions not to properly govern the chemicals that go into water. I mean, this is true in the Midwest as well. My husband and I were just talking about how cancer rates are very, very high in Iowa because there are so many companies that basically pay for the right to pollute as much as they want. It's a corruption problem. Essentially that like groundwater poisoning of any kind is always man-made, and it's almost always that like someone is paying someone else to look the other way as they pollute. Why did I do this? Why did I get here? I think AI is just lame. I think it's lame, it's lazy, it's so when people bring up AI to me, I will usually respond with something a little bit snarky, even if they're saying something, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but sometimes I had a conversation with my mother-in-law, and she was like, well, it's different for you. Like, you're a writer and you sound smart, but if I want an email to sound smarter, I have to use ChatGPT. And I was like, I mean, girl, like, why do you need your email to sound smarter? How much smarter do you think that ChatGPT is making you sound? It's this weird, I was like, you know, setting aside that it's stealing from literally me. I mean, look at the Anthropic settlement. I'm part of that. And that's apparently not enough to motivate. I think my thing is just like, why do things have to clear this bar of like sameness? Why do you have to sound like every email on the planet? I made the joke that Mr. Blake's spelling is atrocious. I mean, he has like low-level dyslexia, and I have become very adept at translating typos because Mr. Blake is like functionally not speaking English in his text messages and emails. Does that actually get in the way of his career? No. So, you know, I think it's just like, I think that there are moments where I'm like, I'm not gonna let you normalize this behavior. I'm not gonna let you pretend this behavior is normal. I think it's just like, I think that there are certain things that it's just like, socially, this sucks. And I'm gonna express that with my face and my voice. I'm not necessarily gonna give you a lecture, but if you wanna talk about it, I've got my talking points organized. I will say, this reminds me of, how am I doing? Oh my god, I'm running out of time. I'm gonna stretch the productivity timer. Okay, I recently read an article in the New Yorker about the enhanced games, and they were making the argument that like, so it's basically people who are allowed to use steroids or they're allowed doping, whatever, they're allowed to do whatever and compete. And the idea was like, these enhanced games were gonna make tons of money, like investment money, because obviously a bunch of world records would be broken. They weren't. I'm not going to get into that. The part I want to focus on is that the interviewer was asking the people behind the enhanced games, like, why do you think this is what people want? What do you think people watch sports for? And they were saying, you know, people watch sports because they want to see strong people do cool stuff, or they want to see fast people be the fastest, or strong people be the strongest. And it reminded me a lot of these arguments about AI, that people are like, well, people just want to feel the emotion, right? They don't need to know, like, art doesn't have to be about the process. Art can just be about the emotional outcome at the end, the product at the end. But that's not true, right? And the enhanced games, they're not right, because why do people love sports? What people really love about sports is the element of surprise, the humanness of there not being an expected outcome. The idea that, you know, somebody's going to do something extraordinary, not because nothing was in their way, but because it was unexpected, because it was spontaneous. I got my best friend for Christmas the book Expensive Basketball by Shea Serrano, and okay, I haven't read it yet, but my best friend called me to read me passages from it over the phone that were basically like, you can't actually, you know, these sort of incredible things that happen that become these amazing moments in sports are not really, they're not really something that you can plan for. They're not something you can pay for. And I think that's my attitude. I thought it was an apt metaphor for the difference between AI, when people treat AI as like, oh, a tool to help you, you know, it's not doing the work for you, it just like, it helps you. But the unexpected things that occur during the process, the ideas that come to you that you would not have thought of if not for this other thing that you witness in real time, this thought you have, it changes the outcome of the art, right? And you can't say that art is only about the emotion that's felt upon viewing the art or experiencing the art or whatever, because that is supposed to be sort of spontaneous as well. It's not supposed to evoke some sort of universal emotion. The thing that it evokes in you is most meaningful when it is spontaneous and a surprise, and I think that's the humanness of it. You know, whenever we talk about the sort of what is human and what is AI or what is machine, humans are unexpected, humans are unpredictable. I think this is something I actually talk about in the Atlas series, that like to be human means you can make being human means that sort of any decision can be made at any time, because we're emotional and unpredictable. And so none of this is like an answer you can give these people, right? I think the answer you give these people is just like, I actually like my brain, it's pretty expensive. I prefer not to lose those skills. I was recently talking to someone about how I don't want to get a car that parallel parks for me, because I learned to parallel park under like extreme conditions. When I lived on fraternity and sorority row, we had to parallel park, and there were frat guys like sitting out on the lawn, like watching the sorority girls parallel park, and obviously it was extremely stressful. And so the fact that I can parallel park well and quickly is like something that I've earned, it's my badge of honor. I would never give it up. And that's, you know, it's a stupid small example of a skill that you would lose. So sometimes when I want to lighten the mood, I bring up the parallel parking story to sort of segue to like, this is a skill that's mine. It's mine, and I'm not giving it to anyone else. I'm not giving all that work away and wherever the rest of this work takes me. Anyway, I have to go. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time. Possibly I might do shorter installments where I just talk about one thing, maybe just what I'm watching or listening to. I haven't even talked about Little House on the Prairie, which I have lots to say about next time. I'll see you next time.